hardware development is a muscle activity. You just have to muscle through it. It never gets easier.
Welcome back to Why Design. I'm your host, Chris White, and this is episode 7 of series 3. This one was recorded in person during my time in Boston, where I had a chance to sit down with Christian Reed, founder and CEO of Reekon Tools, a company building digital measuring tools and data capture platforms for the construction industry. Christian's career blends engineering, product development, military service, and entrepreneurship. Before Recon, he spent several years at Formlabs, where he led development on the Form 3 printer and played a key role in their COVID response efforts. He also served as a platoon leader in the US Army Reserve and even built and shipped a successful multi-tool through Kickstarter, funded in part by a prototyping shop he built in his basement. We got into a lot in this episode. Christian talks about how his time in the military shaped his approach to leadership and problem solving, why construction was the space he chose to focus on, and what it takes to bring a first-of-its-kind hardware product to market, from prototypes to patents to full-blown manufacturing. He's brutally honest about the challenges too, especially around hiring, scale, and knowing what kind of leader the business really needs at different stages. There's a clear sense of vision in everything he says, but also a lot of humility and curiosity about what comes next. We also talk about product market fit, making physical tools that solve real pain points for tradespeople, and how Boulder Pro, their latest platform, connects job sites with the back office in a way that's simple but powerful. If you're building a product, leading a technical team, or just curious about how tools get made from the ground up, this one's full of insight. So let's get into it. Christian, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, really good to have you, and thanks for making the trip out.
Absolutely, Chris.
Really looking forward to dive into this. So, Christian Reed, you are the founder and CEO of Reekon Tools, a Boston-based startup building digital measuring tools and software for connected construction sites. Since launching during the pandemic, Recon has become one of the most talked about new tool brands, blending rugged usability with smart tech, community engagement, and standout storytelling. And certainly how I became aware of you and your brand as well is through one aspect of the storytelling is the LinkedIn content. But your background, though, it spans hardware engineering, the military, startup life, and 3D printing. Each experience adding to how you build tools, lead teams, and think about product ecosystems today. Really looking forward to diving into this. As we said before, we're going to dive into kind of how to launch and scale a successful hardware company in 2025, from early ideas and engineering to brand, team, and traction. We're going to try and cover as much off as we can in the time we've got, but we'll go into your origin story, the design journey there, and how you became more than just a tool company, how to build for tradespeople, not just for the store shelves, the role of storytelling, team building, and staying lean, and then finally your reflections on leadership, lessons learned, and what's next. So yeah, great. The first question I always ask my guests is why design? Where did it all start? What first drew you into engineering and product design?
I guess my passion that I can trace furthest back to, high school and before was building things. I've always been hands-on, making things. And, like many people, that takes evolution from working with stuff you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's, a circular saw, a drill, a Dremel. And then you go to college, you have access to all these 3D printers, CNC machines, and then you go to real industry and kind of get crushed of, how you can make a prototype of anything, but that doesn't translate very well to manufacture something. You learn how to manufacture something. And then today we've, at least at Recon, have gone back to what is for me the purest way someone makes something, which is they go to a home improvement store, they get tools, and then whether they're using it professionally or personally, it's a great way to, really exemplify that creativity in the physical world with it. So I guess that's where my passion always started. And I guess specifically design is something that was much more of a grown appreciation where on the outside, very early, both my family at the time, early adopters of the original iMac, the OG with the CRT screens and stuff with it, and always appreciated the uniqueness of it before it became a lot trendier with it and became back in the mainstream after the iPod, iPhone, and everything came out with it. So I think it was something always in the back of my mind, but to be frank, wasn't something that I fully exercised until going to Recon, where it just seemed like something that was more than, a check mark of industrial design, UX. I also learned the complexities and depths of design, which was also kind of news to me of not thinking of something more notional and quantifying it like many things until you actually execute it. So that was much more of when I came to Recon and, realizing that that was a core tenet of what we do versus, we weren't just going to have good design. Design was going to be one of the core tenets of, the many things we do, from the technology to the practicality of the solutions. That design played a key role of unlocking the puzzle of tools that you can beat the crap out of, but, still are something that introduce an order of magnitude benefit to one's workflow on the job site.
Yeah, wonderful. And you studied at MIT, didn't you? So here in Boston. Talk us through those kind of early days then, and from kind of studying MIT. I think you did some time in the military as well as a reservist, to Formlabs. So talk us through kind of the early career, if you will.
Yeah, so in high school, like I said, I think the most useful thing I did outside of, maintaining all the check marks for getting into a good school was building things. I always liked building things, and MIT, both on paper and practicality, was always advertised as a place where engineers go. That's the pinnacle of engineering. You make all stuff there. And I guess the revelation I had at school and maybe not counterintuitive to most, and now has become a lot trendier to say, but academics are probably the least important thing I did at MIT. I very quickly realized classes were not for me. Going to get the perfect GPA was not for me. It was the time I spent in the machine shop working on products, learning how things were made, and connecting with a very engaged and passionate group of people that any of those schools, MIT, Ivy League, Stanford, are just magnets for attracting that talent. And again, not that you need to go to any of those schools. And if I had my way, college wouldn't be the best people we hired have no pedigree of going to great schools. They're just talented, passionate people, and it's unfortunate that there's a correlation between the two. And, I would be lying if I said having MIT on my resume didn't, help with like people giving me instant credibility. I think it was much more of just a magnet of attracting talented people and a flexible space of giving people the opportunity to explore their passions. And mine certainly was not academics. It was in building things, spending time in the machine shop, making cool inventions and prototypes. And then post MIT, post military, was at Formlabs, and that told me how to make quantity 100,000 of something, and realizing, which wasn't clear at the time, that notionally leaving school and saying, injection molding and stuff is like radically different than actually having to make a product, and like you're on the line with it. And anyone who's made a product knows that final 5 to 10% is where most of the pain and suffering lives versus, getting it to 95% of the way there with it. But you can't deal with that when you're clicking the go button and making 25,000 of something, especially when you're, company revenue, money, any, personal money you put it, if you don't take external capital, is like on the line, like it either works or it doesn't, and you go out with a spectacular bang with it. So yeah, hardware is hard. Definitely appreciate that more at Formlabs. And then in between the two, I did ROTC in school, so that paid for my full education, which was great. Went in the military as a reservist, but got deployed in 2015. So it was kind of nice, I guess, to have a consolidated experience where I went to training for 5 months and then deployed basically all of 2015. And good diversity of, right, not that you work with a bunch of nerds, but, a lot of people go fresh out of school right into working at tech companies. And it's just not that some of them, don't exist in various parts of the leadership spectrum, but it was certainly something that was unique to me, not missing out on the 2 years of technical and company learning. I supplemented with having, a more diversified leadership experience in a much more adverse environment. So when you kind of go back and you deal with fires or issues at a startup, knowing that you're, going to go home, go to sleep, see your dog, your girlfriend, wife, whatever, it's like, all right, whatever. Like it keeps it a lot more level with it as well. So as you said in the introduction, everything kind of culminated, and a lot of it is only clear in retrospect, right? And I think that was really the, culmination and the summary of the early years and what led to Recon of, learning how to make things and think about product development, the leadership of how to grow and, really execute on an entrepreneurial vision. And then Formlabs was really tying it together and how to execute that, make a company, which again, making a product and making a company are separate but related things that need to be successful. And I think all those were really necessary for Recon to be successful. That without any of those items, it would have been, I don't know if it would have been successful or not successful, but it would have been radically different than what it turned out to be.
Oh, absolutely. It's a much harder way to learn those lessons, isn't it, when you just go straight into something. So I just want to dive back slightly in terms of your experience at MIT and also your views now that and the way that you kind of hire. There may be parents of kind of young designers or aspirational designers and engineers kind of listening to this who, they might be worried that their child isn't going to get into like an establishment like MIT, for instance. What advice, if any, would you give to those young people or those kind of parents in terms of how can you get ahead without the brand, the MIT kind of behind you?
Yeah, it's a tough equation. And I say from a perspective of have gone to MIT, but saying, if I had my way, it wouldn't be, if you need to go to school for some academic or research purpose, like, great, that's the place to go for it. Where otherwise, and again, if I could have the MIT branding, but do a startup or work at a company for 4 years, I would 10 times out of 10 say work at a company or startup for 4 years with it. But it's silly to ignore that the branding does have some impact with it. So I think the advice I have, and again, can be misconstrued as well, is like really, follow the path. My passion was always in making something. And it just turned out that MIT was the best place to continue that process of making things, give me access to the facilities to do that, participate in, ROTC to expand, leadership potential that I had at the time with it. So I think it worked out well for me, where in a lot of cases, it's not the end of the world if you don't go there. And I think, I do feel stronger of like, you either go all in or bust. Like either you go to one of the best schools in the world that's going to do it, or other ways, consider A, going a less expensive option to a state school, or B, just forget it completely and figure out a way to get involved in it. And if you are passionate, just document it along the way, right? Especially for design and stuff. There are a lot of people who make cool stuff, but are not good at designing or presenting it. And that gets more into the storytelling aspect that I think one of the keys that helped me outside of having the check marks, SATs, ACTs, standardized testing, GPA with it was I had a very robust portfolio, especially at the time in high school before social media was as big. I had a, blog posts of, the 30 or 40 things I had made in high school with it, document the photos, the process with it. On my essays, I talked about things I made with it. So again, the storytelling of me was not, Christian's a really smart nerd guy with that. It's like, yeah, I have all those, like whatever. So does everyone else who applies to a good school. But I had a lot of stuff that I was passionate about, documented it, and showed how that running track and cross country, all these extracurriculars helped inspire what, my ultimate goal was and expressed, which is, something entrepreneurial when the time came right with it. So I think, just documenting it and keeping and especially for design, where it is so just rich, visual friendly, the better you get at that will help with every aspect of your career, from going to college, getting a job with it. And, we can maybe talk more about later, but the resume is probably the least important thing of looking at designers, their portfolio and what they did. Doesn't matter what company they worked at. It's very easy to see from a portfolio if someone was in the room of an established company or was the one actually driving decisions and, making good design process.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a thing that comes up time and time again in terms of, show your work and show the process that you've been through, not just the nice kind of outcome. It's like, kind of what pain did you go through? What problems did you solve? But yeah, it's interesting that you should be thinking about that kind of before you're prompted to do it.
Yep.
Like just start kind of, like say blogging, documenting.
Even if someone gets laid off, the first thing is like always like, hey, I'll say like, if they say, hey, I'm looking for a job or recently laid off, like, hey, I need a few days to put my portfolio together. Right. And so, that's fine. It's not a big deal, but it always doesn't matter if you have the most comfy job in the world, like maintaining the projects that you're allowed to share, whatever NDAs or whatever you have in place with it. I think that's the key of getting the habit. If you can get in the habit of doing it when you're 17 or 18 years old, it's a skill that will benefit you for the rest of your career and life, and also just your reflections. Right, so it's great to look back like, wow, that was 5 years ago now that I worked on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's especially at that early stage in your career as well, where it's super competitive for each job role. Being able to say, yeah, here you go, I've got it.
Help you stand out. That's what it's all. Anything, job, college is all about standing out in a crowded field.
Absolutely. So, well, let's talk about Reekon Tools, founded during 2020, during obviously the deep dark days of COVID. What sparked the idea for Recon?
Yeah, so I think it was always knowing I was always entrepreneurial. I had entrepreneurship. I think falls into two broad categories, or general categories I like to describe. One is like passionate about the idea and being an entrepreneur. And one is what I'll call MBA entrepreneurship, which is, I don't care what the idea is. I just want to make a company that's going to disrupt the space with it. And for me, that could be something, and again, there's nothing wrong with either, but it's a lot different being like, wow, I found a company like, I don't know, maybe it's crude to say and like a cliche, but like Uber, right? Like, is anyone passionate about travel or like the idea of like disrupting a space, right? And again, nothing wrong with that. But for me, I knew that for me to stay engaged and interested in the highs and lows of a company, it had to be something that I saw, of course, a pathway for it to, go to the races, but B, something that I was passionate about, which for me was always making something with it. So I think Formlabs is a great way to work and learn in a very entrepreneurial environment, but really set the stage for when I found the idea of being able to go to the races with it. And I think that idea came up not necessarily by accident, but when I first started at Formlabs, I had launched a Kickstarter for a little multi-tool I made, which was a good first step process of just full ownership of designing something, marketing it, selling it, and going out the door with it. I made, in the 50 to 100K range with it over a couple of years, which was great. I used all the money to build a shop in my basement, so it was a really cool space, which is actually where we wound up starting Recon years later with it. But then in 2019, we had just launched our flagship 3D printer. Things were cooling off a little bit, so just something to go on in the background. I took a look at my idea book of like, hey, here are things I'd drawn up over the years. Let's see if something is worthwhile to make with it. And then that came to our first product, the M1 Caliber, which clamps onto a miter saw, measures what's rolled underneath it. Very simple, but treated that as like, hey, this is a cool idea. We'll probably sell it. Let's launch it as a Kickstarter and treat it as a side project. So there's not the intention of like, we're going to make this a company. It's like, let's launch it as a side project, see what it does with it. So did that, spent the 6 or so months making the product, designing it, coming out. And again, all these same principles in its infancy, like it has to look nice with it. It has to be functional. It has to look like a DeWalt tool that belongs in a job site, but still have this technology aspect to it and work all the functional requirements. We're going to launch in April of 2020, then COVID, became more wishy-washy. So we're like, all right, let's wait until June. And honestly, that worked out well just because A, that's when DIY projects started to take off, and B, it gave us a lot more time to do things that only in retrospect we realized were what led to that, first Kickstarter campaign we did, which raised 0.2 million in the 45 or so day period with it. That's and crazy. Then when you see that, that's when it's like, hey, I should, it'd be foolish for me to treat this as a side project. Like this is, allows me to have the flexibility. And that's when we really started to say, hey, how do we change this from this, cool and interesting, obviously successful idea, but to a company that has the potential to go the races with it. So again, nothing at the time was deliberate of like, hey, we're going to remain bootstrapped. We're not going to accept any VC at the time. And, didn't really have the same story to tell to make it a VC backable company with it. But I think on the outside at the time, and, both heard that directly and indirectly, it was like, oh, Recon, Christian and Recon's working kind of like a little gimmicky side project or whatever with it. So, all that, adds fuel and the fun with it because, no one has the insight and, we can play the long game. And, the passion and excitement about Recon is not only products we make, but knowing that the long-term vision for this outside of, money on the back end is that, we have the chance to disrupt an elemental industry to the world, right? Walking down the street and seeing dudes with Recon gear on their person is like, that's the real excitement and passion for here versus like, just, another company, another idea. So that's really the fuel that keeps it going and allows you to go through the inevitable peaks and valleys of a startup. And what led to the initial foundation of Recon, which took side project and turned it into a company. And, now today, after several 100,000 products shipped.
That's awesome. So how long was it then before you because you were still working at Formlabs whilst you were kind of side project? And I guess if they'd have known how serious it was going to be, they maybe took you a bit more serious. And I don't know, I imagine there's a lot of people I speak to whose contracts would prevent them doing kind of the side project like that, because it's potentially taking you away from the work that you're employed to do. But how long? Anyway, that's a tangent. How long was it before were you doing it before you then exited and then went full time? Yeah,
probably I would say 7 or 8 months of prep, and then we launched a Kickstarter, and then it's pretty clear pretty quickly. It's like, all right, now you have to kind of make the serious decision, and it was, to be honest, kind of a no-brainer, right? Like, and I think people appreciate that. Formlabs was a great magnet, a testament to Max and everyone over there of just like they attracted really smart entrepreneurial people. And this is inevitably what, Formlabs has many spin-off companies with it, and is, really something that we should look at as a prideful event, right? I think that shows just the power of attracting those people there, nurturing them to the next level, and then them going off and doing their own things with it. So I think that's how they view it there with it. And something that I was very, just I think a caution for young designers of like, you shouldn't work for a company that views that as competing, right? Like a lot of stuff I did on my own helped me be a better, engineer, program manager, program director for Formlabs with it, and vice versa with it. They helped me, I helped them with it. In any environment where you try to limit a designer, engineer, or anyone from doing their outside passions is not a job you should work at, right? So that's something you have to be careful with. And I turned down several job offers where there were more stringent controls in place in the whatever confidential intellectual property agreement of what you're allowed to do, what the company owns. Like some companies would say anything you invent inside or outside of work using your own stuff is property. And that's like obviously not a fair, reasonable way. And I think people sometimes just blindly sign them, where a lot of times you have lever. Like I've told people like, no, I'm not signing this. And they'd be like, okay, after being like, okay, that's a problem. A day later, like, okay, no problem. You don't have to sign it. So I think people should always feel empowered to push back on that. And while of course we want to protect, rights related to our core products, intellectual property, resources, we have the same flexibility. And many of our engineers as well have, worked on their own projects, and two of them actually left, and, the good attrition to have to work on their own endeavors elsewhere with it. So that, as a founder, from a founder perspective, as well as an employee perspective, should always be looked at as a prideful event versus something that's like an offense, or like, hey, that's in conflict with, working for a company with it. And if they do make a stink about it, it's probably a red flag of not to work for the company.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because it's, on the one hand, companies want the they want the longevity, they want they invest in their people, they want to see them succeed, but then also as a story, bringing people in, it's like, well, look at our alumni, look at what they went and did,
which is great. That's what you want. I think it's again a very short term and ignorant opinion to say that that's in conflict with like hiring the best and brightest people, and therefore outputting the best products a company can.
That's awesome. And in terms of the Kickstarter campaign, did you did all that yourself in terms of setting it all up, or did you have some support there? In terms of marketing experts?
Yeah, we always did everything ourselves with Kickstarter, outside of, on occasion, with help with pay-per-click ads specifically with it. But another one, just like design, and I'll extrapolate design to both content creation. Like those are muscles in this day and age you just need to have on your team, right? It's like it's always easy, and I have a lot of these conversations and try to be very generous and flexible at time, just because I know how valuable it was for me. If someone reaches out on LinkedIn, I'm generally always open to helping them when their personal endeavors with it. I think that's important to, give back to the community. But a lot of the conversations are from people. It's like, I don't know if I want to be on camera. I want to do it. Like, can I outsource it to someone? And that's, the idea here is not that it's always comfortable. And there are a lot of things I post, and, between LinkedIn and social media that, when you first start doing it, you're like, is this cringy? Do I want to do it? But it's just the gift that keeps giving. Like one of the most valuable things we've done, and not everything we've done is deliberate. I can speak now after 5 years of experience, but at the time was like deliberate, like this is exactly what's going to happen. Like you don't know sometimes, right? That's part of entrepreneurship. You take risks. Yeah, all super beneficial, and really a muscle that any team really needs to have, right? If you can't make content and you don't appreciate design, like you're just shooting yourself in the foot with it. And again, it's okay if you like one of the founding engineers or like other founders like does it, but if it's not a core part of your leadership team early on in a startup, like you're just throwing away money or throwing away potential for a company. It doesn't matter what industry, what space. And my go-to example always is that there's an account on TikTok with 5 million followers of a company in Minnesota that fills up pools with chlorinated water. That's all they do with it, right? So it just kind of highlights that, because a lot of people are easy to be like, oh, well, it wouldn't work for our space or our pet. Like any company, B2B, B2C, D2C can make engaging and interesting content, but people like to use it as an excuse of like, I don't know if it would work for my space with it. Every space benefits from content creation. So, but a lot of people just think they can justify it to themselves, be like, oh yeah, that only works for Recon because I have a tape, but again, it could have said the same thing 5 years ago of like, you only have a boring tape measure and you're going to, make videos that get 300 million views with them. Like good luck with that. Right. But now I've done it several times and have the credibility to back it up only after 5 years. So again, easy to, say like, oh, always believed in it. But, at the time people, and just seems to be many conversations I have of like, are on board and ask like, hey, Chris, the most requests I get are like how to do a crowdfunding or how to, make content creation. And like always results like, I don't know if it'll work for us with it, when a lot of times it would, if they just had the consistency to stick with it for a period of time.
I think that's the thing. A lot of people they hear social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, podcast, and they give it a go. And when they don't see those instant results or gratification, then they're like, oh, clearly that's not right for our market or right for our business. But I've seen it personally from my business. I've been posting consistently 3 to 5 times a week on LinkedIn for the last 18 months. And I get people today reach out to me because of stuff I posted last year. Yeah. And you get people that don't ever engage with your stuff, but then they'll come up to you at a conference.
It's always LinkedIn where that, people exist in the shed. It's very specific, and realizing that normal TikTok, Instagram is much different than LinkedIn, where it's much more concentrated, obviously relevant to your audience. And the vast majority of people live in the shadows, and they only reveal themselves when they want something, when they want to connect, or you meet them at a conference, which is fine. And that's the point of, I guess, that consistency with it, that it sticks out. And as you know, only like whatever 2% of people actually consistently post on LinkedIn. So it's a lot easier to make your voice loudest in the space.
So easy. Yeah. And I think a lot of people get hung up on impressions and likes and stuff. And
vanity metrics. Yeah.
But the reality is, even if you get 100 likes, on a post on LinkedIn, or 100 impressions, that's 100 people that have seen your stuff. Yeah. How often do you stand up in front of 100 people and tell them about
a lot of conversations at a trade show or speaking to get that level of engagement.
It's a very husky voice, isn't it, after kind of those conversations? But I think it's consistency is key, and credibility and authenticity. And I think what I love about your story is that you've been doing that from high school. It sounds like, kind of building up those stories so that, even putting yourself out of your comfort zone, you're already at a place of kind of relative comfort compared to other people going in from scratch. And then, so going into a Kickstarter where it's all about storytelling, to get people to part with their cash for a promise that they might get something.
Which is still a wild concept. Now having done it 4 or 5 times, it's still Kickstarter is a wild concept that people will give you money for, give you as a company, basically an interest-free, risk-free loan for an indeterminate period of time for maybe getting a product slightly before others do with it. So remarkable concept, but one that I think Kickstarter's now raised $8.2 billion for startup companies. So just a remarkable process.
It's fantastic. Yeah. And so, I think anyone listening that's young and ambitious and thinking about launching a product, they need to get into their content, their storytelling, and maybe leverage the platforms like Kickstarter.
That was not that I have a regret from doing it, but I think that's something that I think would have benefited me to do in either probably wouldn't have been feasible in high school. I don't think it even existed in high school at the time, but for college, like launching a Kickstarter, I think would have gone, even if something simple, like I'm going to make 50 of a product by hand artisanally, but it's going to get me in the mindset of making a product, getting it to customers, making feedback, telling the story. I think that's something don't know if it would have been practical, but again, advice for others, like Kickstarter is a really way to, put your hands and chips on the table and actually like get something, ship it out, and just go through the full process with it. So that's a very easy way to validate, but something that a lot of people like to push off with it, but it's good. I did, a test run before going to the big show, 4 years later with it on Kickstarter. And that was very valuable endeavor to undertake.
That's awesome. Brilliant. So Recon's been going, 5 years now? Yeah, well, we're in June, aren't we? So it's your kind of 5-year anniversary.
Great.
So happy birthday. So you've built your community, you've scaled production, you've launched a bunch of products with the Boulder Pro more recently, I think. Is that what we've got here? Or is that...
This is the new tape measure. So the Boulder Pro is a software platform that connects it all together, and this is our latest digital tape measure.
Awesome. Cool. So what's been the hardest part about scaling the business and scaling physical products? Hey guys, just a quick one for me and then we'll get straight back to the episode. If you've ever felt like your pipeline is keeping you up at night, or you're not quite sure where to go next in your design career, and what you really want is to feel more in control of your business, your pipeline, your next move, maybe even be the person your peers or competitors look to and think, they're onto something, then check out the Why Design community. It's full of founders, leaders, engineers and designers working in hardware and physical product development. We share insights, run online and in-person meetups, collaborate on projects and help each other figure out what's working and what's not. If that sounds useful, head over to teamkodu.com/events to sign up. It's free, low pressure and genuinely made for people like you. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, everything about hardware, especially now doing both and we've done both. We have several pieces of software platform, but you kind of get spoiled of how easy it is to ship software. And, software has its challenges. It's not to say that it's easy in a grand sense, but in a relative sense to hardware, like it pales in, changing one color on the packaging is a 20 email 4-week exchange in the best case, and several $1,000s of, either tooling, samples, DHL shipping from wherever you're making it with it. So hardware in general is hard. And, now after 15 years of making products, it never gets easier. You just have a little bit more understanding of what could go wrong and how to deal with it. But that doesn't make it any less painful or any less suffering with it. Hardware development is a muscle activity. You just have to muscle through it. It never gets easier. There's not a magic software solution or, thing you could do or a process that's going to make it easy. It'll make it more predictable, but a lot of times, and kind of weird to say, like that will just bring you to the baseline, the par of the course. If you have all those processes, it will ensure you will ship a product with it. It doesn't guarantee it'll be on time. It'll be to the perfect quality on day one with it. But I think that's the kind of hard revelation you have at some point with it, that you think you could, we're going to make a process and eventually crank it out. But the saying, unless you're making blenders, like it's not going to happen, right? Unless you make something so commoditized and predictable that has a slightly different design on it, it's not going to be a straightforward process to do with it. And so I think that on the engineering side, and then on the our side, a lot of it, at least for us now, and I think in general, is really just the continued go-to-market size with it, right? Like we've had a lot of success. We have, an 8-figure revenue company, several 100,000 of these in the field with it. But to get to that level, and how we're treating is always like we're shooting for the stars. We're not going to be complacent. And there have been many phases and continue to be places where we could sustain this and be very profitable for the rest of our lives. Soup it up and then get it be acquired by a tool company, private equity company, move on with it. Where for us, we're still, until it becomes not interesting or not engaging, we're going to go to the races with it. So I think we're at the phase now where our biggest, challenge as a company, and I think many organizations reach this, where our, where we are in the marketing funnel, that if someone's looking for a digital tape measure, they're 95% of the time going to buy a Recon product. There's no doubt on that. We completely and totally own that market. And, anyone's welcome to do their own research, but all roads lead to Recon. But the more lucrative one is, how do you get into the minds of the tens of millions of people each year who buy a conventional tape measure and tell them that this is a better, more efficient, less error-prone way to capture something they do every day on a continual basis with one of our products and software solutions with it. So I think that's the bigger challenge, and really a multifaceted solution, right? How do we make, products, price points, feature variations that appeal to these people? How do we support the full workflow? And I think that's really what led us to software, that a lot of cases our hardware products were perfect for the application, but the software infrastructure just doesn't exist to take data in the field and move it to the office. You can do that with a spreadsheet very crudely, but then anytime you introduce impediments to the workflow, especially in construction, people are going to throw their hands up and be like, hey, this is, seems like a lot of overhead. The guys in the field have been doing this for, literally 60 years since Stanley came out with the first modern tape measure in 1963. So it's a lot of passion and energy, and a lot of times pride to overcome. You can look through our social media and get a pretty good aggregate of what people think of the products, but a lot of times it's a prideful event. I don't need a digital tape measure to tell me what to read, where that's not the real feature this is solving. Is like, I'm taking out 3 very error-prone steps in a normal process that's repeated tens of times a day, which is looking at a tape measure, writing down a measurement, and then typing it into a spreadsheet, order form, or whatever else on the back end with it. So overcoming that and creating a machine that's able to address that with everything, case studies, emails, and just make that a very systematic process, is how we go from being a moderately successful tool company to Herculean technology company that's disrupting a multi-bajillion dollar space of construction with it. So lots still to figure out, some leads, some things to continue on, but still not fully apparent what the solution is to solve that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like I say, it's not just a tool that's accurate in terms of the reading that it's giving you. It's pushing that accuracy down the kind of supply chain as well, in terms of.
And that was a unique insight to the space. I think two junctions we had at Recon that I think led to success is, one, realizing, I think to you said as well, of like, for a tool to be useful, in my trade show trick, I don't want to damage something in here, is people say, hey, is this tough though? I'll just throw it on the concrete. Just it can be broken, but it's very difficult to deal with it. But I think, very early on, we realized that it had to have both functionally and appearance wise the durability of a DeWalt, Milwaukee, Makita Festool product, with, still slipping in the technology with it, where there's a big graveyard of products that had one or the other with it, a lot of durability, but no innovation whatsoever, which basically describes every major tool company. And then on the other side, gadgets, things that look like they belong next to an Apple computer in a kitchen, hanging up a picture frame, which is really counter to what a good tool needs to do with it. So I think that was the first set, and something that we executed on very well with the M1. And then to further that, realizing that if you just have tools, that's a point solution, versus if you want to replace a workflow, you need to offer a complete offering with it. So we have tons of software. There are 5 different ways you can pull data off of this. And I think having a very robust, documented, and just an energetic team, that some other companies have it, but it's super enterprise and costs tens of thousands of dollars, or B, it's completely unsupported. You're kind of left on your own to figure it out, where we'll send our developers to help customers out with it. And I think that's really the key to driving the adoption to it over time, and replacing a workflow versus providing, one tools, but not really unlocking those order of magnitude benefits.
So how much does that retail for then?
So this is our new one. This is going to retail for about $100, and I think accessibility was a big design here. So our first digital tape measure was good. We've sold many of them. They're useful and set the stage and a lot of our internal learnings. But for $250 and being probably 2.5 times the size of this, it was very unapproachable for someone who wasn't fully ready to commit to it. So I think this was our new series. Comes in a 16, 5 meter, and 7.6 meter, 25-foot versions as well with it. And I think all those are much more oriented to get the casual person to try out digital and then over time view the benefits of it and have them grow into the process versus have to dump them all at once is usually a recipe for disaster in the construction space, which is a little bit slower moving to, and rightfully so sometimes, to adopt new workflows.
Yeah. But $100, it seems like a very reasonable kind of investment, especially for a professional. Where
it pays for itself. It very quickly pays for itself. But, that's something we have to work on better of expressing as well, of like where all these smaller, because again, it's a lot of the minutes add up to hours. In this case, a lot of very small errors add up to hundreds of dollars wasted over a month. So this becomes a very small investment relatively to eliminate most of those.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Especially in a construction site. Where does it measure from then?
So it could either measure from the front or the back surface. So the front would be a more standard conventional, just trying to measure between two surfaces, or inside if I'm doing like a cabinet or a doorway or something with it. It's pretty flexible how it does there. And then anytime measurement is saved, it's sent over Bluetooth. And that's when you can start to put it into external software applications that either we make or that companies themselves have for organizing their job site data.
Oh, that's really cool. Is it feels lighter than I expected as well. It's got a good weight to it, but it's you wouldn't mind that on your belt or go.
No, it's pretty. I mean, again, I think people don't realize that even a conventional tape measure, if you have a 25-foot tape measure blade, there's a 25-foot spring inside of it. So literally, it's just like a block of steel in it. That's why tape measures are heavy. So until carbon fiber maybe becomes more accessible, they're going to be continually a heavier asset that you carry.
It's reassuring though if for a tool to be heavy. You feel it's well made, it's solid.
Got character to it. Yeah.
So you're a founder now. You're an engineer. You still got a passion about it, but then you've got the social media side of things, the marketing hat as well, and you're a leader as well of a team. So how do you divide kind of, and you've got a co-founder. How do you divide in kind of all those kind of roles between yourself and your co-founder and kind of all the different hats?
So I think at a high level, and we can zoom down a little bit. Between myself and Costas, my co-founder and CTO of the company, that Costas is a lot more focused on the engineering, manufacturing, and R&D of our products with it. We're all focused more on product operations, business, and design side of things, but with a lot of overlap between it. They're not independent functions. We both understand and appreciate each other's work. Some, where I have an actual, degree and past experience in it, where on the other side, we're both learning, all these other things for the first time at Recon with it. I think that's picking a good co-founder is great, and something that we had been very friendly over the 5 or so years we worked together at Formlabs, and has, worked out, I think, remarkably well for a co-founder, that there's never been any issues whatsoever of like responsibilities. It's just always clear and always the same goal and same passion about what we're solving with it. So that's been great, and just one less thing to worry about if you have a co-founder that doesn't work out on. So that's great. Again, and I've thought about this before as well, that a lot of people think and spend too much time brainstorming these grand initiatives where everything, it doesn't matter how big and what the culmination of it is, it's just a process of every day chipping away at it. And I think that's something I've been able to do very effectively, that growing a TikTok account to 1 million followers was a result of spending 20 minutes every day for 5 years making a fun video with it. So people have this idea of like, we're going to do a month sprint and that's going to go, and it never works out, right? And then you get distracted, where because I have to do everything from marketing, business, you just have to each week decide what are the biggest things you're trying to accomplish and what are the more granular goals that help you get there with it. And very often I'm surprised that they're not sprints, they're not grand, and maybe in a localized period, but they're all milestones that culminate in these grander initiatives with it, of making a new product to a marketing campaign or a Kickstarter. Is just a process of like, all right, we're going to take 20 photos each week. I'm going to write one LinkedIn post a day, make one video a day, make one blog post every week with it. And again, in the time, you're like, wow, this is just a very small piece of the bigger puzzle. But then you look back after a year and you have a fully populated website, social media account, LinkedIn page, B2B sales opportunities with it. So it's a lot of distilling larger goals into things that quantifiable and really just sticking to it. Too many people just try for a little bit, say this isn't working, goes away, and then look back after a year and nothing was accomplished, just because every week you're scrambling in a completely new direction versus making smaller steps to progress towards the goals. And that is absolutely not in conflict with a lot of what I do is like, what are our 100x goals? But those can be distilled to things that can be accomplished in a week, even if it
Yeah.
takes a year to realize with it. So it's not at odds with quarter goals, but it's just more a practical way to achieve them than have to be lost in the space of, hitting home runs every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and those little kind of activities like 20, 30 minutes a day, kind of creating content. You build up a library of stuff as well, don't you? Very quickly. So, and there's no harm in repurposing kind of old content.
And we do.
And just
we repurpose it, useful for ads, any blog posts we do. So we have a Lightroom with tens of thousands of photos that we accumulate broken down by product. We have a digital asset management system that has all of our videos in it, which was a more recent one just because it became more than me just working on the projects with it. But having a content library is a gift that keeps giving with it. Then when you make a new project, it's just a matter of putting it together versus have to be like, all right, we have to go film this. We have, especially for us where we want to, all of our scenes are very deliberate about their on job sites. And we have some ways to simulate this in the office, but it's not like as simple as just like taking a screenshot on a computer. We want like sawdust to be in the air, sparks flying, and that's not something you can just wave your wand and do. It's something that we, have opportunities to do, and definitely, a site visit is an action-packed session of taking content, getting user feedback, trying out new products with it, and trying to do that all in a 2-hour period while being safe and respectful of the, customers' times who are letting us on their sites.
Sounds like a lot of fun as well, which, a lot of people forget to have when they're trying to build something. So you have to be serious about it, but you're still going to have fun along the way. So fantastic. So you mentioned obviously your products are for real world use, not just for kind of creating kind of these artificial videos. So what do you think is different about designing for trades versus traditional consumer retail?
Yeah, I think it's hard because like I said, it's really a balance of like, we're not technology adverse. Like obviously our products are based on technology, but you have to be able to frankly beat the shit out of them, right? You have to be able to throw it around, drop test it, beat it up, and how to, both communicate that and, create the design language to do that, but being respectful of like our items have buttons on them, they have screens with them, lasers, rechargeable batteries, so things that are not as accustomed to the space. And I think, like any good designer, there's the check mark of like, is someone a good designer? It's silly to say, but there are a lot of people who are just not. They may have degrees, worked at companies, but they're not good. They don't understand good versus bad design. So that check mark is hit. The next one is, can they capture the essence of a brand? And that doesn't mean just like the brand language, but do they understand what we're trying to do as a brand and what are these collective goals that we're trying to achieve with it? And then the third one after that is, then how do you combine this all together and take the aspects of toughness to survive a job site and durability with it, where toughness is both an aesthetic appearance as well as functional appearance, and combine those all together with the manufacturability, the cost implications with it. So it is a very involved and complicated process, and why it's so remarkable we have the designers we do, and they're great. We have a team of 3 full-time designers across graphic, UX, and industrial design, but they're extremely hard to find with it. And it's really, when you find them, it's the best, and we want to keep them forever with it and let them grow and expand their careers. But it's very, very difficult to find people who have that ability to merge all those items together to make good output with it. And sometimes they have one and it has no correlation if where someone went to school, what companies they work. And a lot of times bigger companies are kind of worse, right? And I think this was the Humane AI example of the pin of Apple pedigree. But when you're in a room and subsidized by all that firepower and infinite resources, you make bad startup decisions where you need to be scrappy and sometimes more concerned with an MVP progression to a product versus like Apple's the only company in the world where designers say something and manufacturing figures out a way to do it. That doesn't work at any other company in the universe.
No, it's obviously not that there's anything wrong with a career at Apple, but it's a very different career. And it's the same within the UK with places like Dyson. Great reputation, great brands, but in terms of the actual working practices, very, very different to a lot of other consumer brands.
It's different coming into an award-winning room, and like, yes, you're probably a good designer to be there with it, but that's a much different muscle than establishing a brand from scratch with it. And this is another revelation that I had post-college, because I did the same thing, interviewed at Apple, be like, wow, it'd be cool to work there, and know how radically different my career and understanding would be working at a company like Apple. And again, good diversifying, maybe good to have on a cycle, but a startup is where the real you really earn your stones as a designer and like badges, because you're the one who's on the hot seat versus like subsidized in a room and like just propped up by the environment around you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people can get kind of pulled in by the kind of the flashy lights and the brand, and then end up kind of stuck. They're siloed into a kind of this is a role, and now you're the expert in this particular technology, which then when there's an economic event or there's layoffs, it can then become really tricky for them to find something else, because a lot of companies, especially smaller companies, want people who have broader experience and able to just throw themselves at
without
problems
needing a full team to do some core functions with it. Yeah,
absolutely. Definitely. But no, really interesting. So we've talked about storytelling, community. Has storytelling helped you kind of earn trust faster or open up kind of partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a gift that keeps giving, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from I guess the two types of two main types of, we'll call it social content we make, is between LinkedIn, which is more B2B focused, and social content, which is just top of funnel, like get awareness with it. But even a lot of B2B connections, like, hey, I saw you talk about your tape measure on Instagram, and just getting what is effectively a free 20 to 40 million views a month of our content, and really establish it as what we're trying to do, which is the inception of like digital is the standard. A diamond ring is forever. Like, we want to make digital tape measures are the standard. If you're using something else, you're old, you're a dinosaur with it. So you do that through repetition and get into the background with it. And when we first started, from everything, going on job sites, getting people to test it, you have a random dude during COVID be like, hey, is it cool if I come on your job site? Where now we have, blue badge, Recon, million followers, like, hey, is it cool if we send you some products and get your feedback on them? So it just helps add a lot of, or even people looking at it, right? Like, oh, is this a random Chinese brand? It's like, oh, no, they're based in Boston. They have 1 million. Oh, wow. That's, we have, there's outside, in total social media, we have the most followers of any tool company. And then on Instagram, only DeWalt and Milwaukee have more followers than us. Again, somewhat vanity metrics, but just shows the credibility we've been able to establish of like who we're rolling with, and just the idea that they get that because they're $14 billion companies and they sell everywhere. We did it because we put the muscle into making great social content for 5 years consistently with it. So yeah, it's absolutely the gift that keeps giving, and adds an immense amount of street credit to our products, and various points in the funnel. Sometimes it's top of level awareness. Sometimes it's like, this seems interesting, let me check them out on TikTok, social, and you just see all roads lead to Recon, whether you're on Google, Chat GPT. We've been very deliberate about making that funnel work to theirs with it. So when we figure out the top part and like, wow, digital tape measures are key, all roads will lead back to Recon, versus that have to be a new activity and compete with others trying to do it, and something that we grew up doing, so we completely live it, and something that we're solely focused on with it, versus a larger company may have to diversify it, and realizing that it's not just a hardware, it's an entire ecosystem that's built around it, from the content side as well as the functional and product side of things too.
I love it. What do you think's been, what's been the most surprising thing that's come of kind of the content strategy, whether it be a win or just something completely unexpected?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the gift that keeps giving. I mean, ESPN has reposted our, a tape measure video that's gone viral with it. And we've had all sorts of influencers well outside of the construction space reach out and be like, hey, can you send me, one of these tape measures? I'd love to feature it on my, story. From the celebrity side of things, we've had, professional hockey and football players come to the office and just want to see the products with it. So I think there's a lot of, reach, and just especially in the US, of just how applicable DIY is with it, that people appreciate it and see that it's a very stagnant space, and something like this sticks out in a very cool way. That's like, wow, it still looks durable, but cool, it has a screen on it, it has a laser with it. Like, wow, that's pretty sweet. So just like holding it and seeing it in person has been a great way to close the loop. And then very similar on LinkedIn as well, which is something to, I didn't really start until like mid-January of this year. Posting consistently is just the gift that keeps giving, right? Like every conference I go to, every says like, hey, Christian, I saw you did this on LinkedIn, or any conversation starts with like something that I did that is only visible because I posted it on LinkedIn with it. And also helps you, again, being a self-funding company, it does help promote a little bit of accountability for myself. Like we don't have a, board of directors or external investors. So it does help keep you a little more accountable, and, the perceived or reality that other people are looking at what you're doing. So it does keep you a bit more, disciplined about, posting wins, losses, and just trying to, I think it is a skill in itself of sharing wins and losses in a public environment with it. And not to say that's for everyone, but I think that's been a helpful way to keep us accountable to our goals. And, when things aren't going well, knowing that, others may be watching, and like, how do we, get out of the hole or issue we're dealing with?
I think it just makes you more of a person and more approachable, doesn't it? To be kind of, if you're authentic on LinkedIn, and I think there's a bit of cynicism that goes around when it's all success stories, and it's a bit showy, isn't it?
All success and all thought leadership, right? Like I think we're really disciplined about talking about things we're actually doing, not like notionally like, oh, I think this is going to, because then LinkedIn is full of AI trash content as well, of just like generated, not thought provoking. So really sticking and being disciplined about things we're doing and thinking about, and being vulnerable in a place and putting a face to a brand that, hey, we're passionate about this. This is, if you make a product, this is who you're competing with, people who live and breathe this every single day with it. So maybe it's a warning to others who would get involved in a space that we'll put our all and efforts into making it work.
But it's interesting because you obviously the business, you're still very much involved in the day to day, but if the business was much bigger, and it loses that identity, doesn't it? If you're too far removed from the product and the marketing and you're outsourcing that, it doesn't have the same impact. But I
think it's all culture based, right? I mean, I know plenty of large companies who have hundreds of employees and the founder is still the de facto head of marketing, or not that I'm the head of marketing, but it's where you want to choose your energy and what the culture is made with it. So there's always a way to sustain that. And, I think there are always challenges at a startup, but having 1 to 50 people is different than 50 to 200, which is different than 200 to 1,000. So they're just different challenges. And that's when you have to start instilling your culture, not only on individual contributors, but managers, directors, vice presidents, and everything. So that's a challenge we'll have to cross when we go on, but certainly not something that will, limit us at that point, just a new opportunity for us to figure out a process that works.
Have you got your have you got individuals in your team that are also producing content on their own kind of personal feeds?
A lot of our designers started to do that. And I've encouraged people to do it as well, just because I think it's immensely helpful for personal, even if you have no aspirations to be an entrepreneur, it just helps establish oneself. And, what used to be back in the day, like Hackaday or Instructables. And I did several of those back in the day as well. And those were ways for me to grow myself as a inventor at the time of making these fun gadgets. I posted tutorials about how to make them with it and got some recognition. One of them got in Popular Mechanics or something. So cool. Early ways to do it, and why I was content. But back to the first thing, the blog, right? The blog I made got me into school, established credibility, and that just kept that philosophy in different forms just kept expanding, and now it's something we leverage to grow the business regularly.
That's cool, and you're encouraging a little kind of army of content generators as well. So it's
absolutely,
that's fantastic. Kind of loop back a little bit on the team side of things. How do you spot kind of talent that will thrive in the kind of the startup chaos, or the kind of the scaling kind of chaos that you're in now?
Everyone likes to say they want to work at a startup until it actually comes time with it. So that's something we go pretty deep on, but that's pretty universal by people, I think. But for a designer, the first thing we look at is outside projects. If they have outside projects, it shows that whether maintaining a full-time job or a college education, that they're working on more diverse projects than just what's specified to them. So that's the first part, and that's usually represent a portfolio. So that's the first step, and then we'll grill them on decisions they made. Why did they understand what they were doing? Did they think about alternatives? Why did they choose this color? And good designers can explain that, where others kind of, orange is bright or something with it. So that's the first step. And then second, we do have a design challenge. So this is something that not controversial, but something, again, we have done many things that others, frown upon, of we have never been work from home. And we always, every single role has some kind of take home challenge. And my argument for this is if you're not willing to spend 8 hours or so working on this, something about a startup is not going to be right for you with it. So that's great. The people who say no almost certainly would not have been great to work at a startup, because they would have been so protective of their time, which is totally fine. It's just not a place. The startup is about the company and the learnings and growing and, the equity that can be worth something in the future. So if that's not a vibe for you, then you're just not a vibe here with it. So that's been super helpful. And honestly, it works out in my mind in candidates' favors. There were interns and full-time hires that we would have passed on. Their portfolio is okay. And we're like, let's throw them a take home. And they did an incredible take home. And that's what got 2 out of the 3 designers, I think, got the job because of their take home with it. So it's a filter as way for people who are lacking experience to come in and go out, as well as with more senior people. You sometimes wonder, were you just in the room for this, or were you the one actually who drove it forward and came up? Because it's easy to say, I came up with this. Well, did you, or was it someone else who did it and you just subsidized it or finished it or started it? So that's sometimes hard to decipher until you really grill into it in more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, that attitude and the kind of the commitment to just kind of go all in is very difficult to test, but it sounds like you've got a good test there. So fantastic. Well, we're going to wrap up in a few moments, but perhaps you could talk about kind of what you're excited about coming up, what's next on the kind of the roadmap that you're able to talk about over the next 12 months, and that you're kind of really excited about.
Yeah, I think both externally is that now very short. So these are about to ship. We're just manufacturing them now. So should ship in about 2 months. And I think this is the first opportunity we have a general purpose tool with the right price point that can get into people's hands and honestly has a much better shot of getting a foothold in retail, where $100, that can be an impulse buy purchase versus $250. I don't know, for a tape measure. So I think getting that into the mainstream is really the first goal. The second is how much, we had a more consumer app that we had before, and we just Boulder Pro as our professional software platform. And that's led to a lot of really interesting conversations and B2B use cases of people who are passionate of like, hey, if we can make this work on this team of 5, we'll scale it to our team of 500 with it. And that's, I think a lot of this was happening, but it was a lot more disconnected from us, of people buy the tape measures and figure it out for themselves. With now inserting this and open API into the process, people are coming to us and working with us to collaborate and discuss workflows, which is great. So we're getting customer discovery, we're getting feedback with it. And I think that's a great one. So those two are really the biggest ones. Of we have the dry powder, but we need to figure out a way to light it off with it. And then going forward, a long roadmap. I think on the hardware side, we have a lot of similar accessible products and how to get those manufactured out to the environment. And then on the side of software side, I think it's adding content. How do we leverage new sensors, computer vision, if the Meta Ray-Ban equivalent, which, I think took everyone by surprise, of like not the Apple Vision Pro, but the Meta Ray-Bans. If you can make that mainstream, what implications does that have here for adding context to measurements? If I just took 20 measurements on this wall with computer vision, could we decide that like that one's from the outlet, that one's from the ceiling? So this is where you start to use the buzzwords, machine learning, AI, computer vision, but really able to do something that just is orders of magnitude better than now with it. So not only are you sending measurements, but I'm also automatically generating context just by looking at something and taking a measurement with it. So I think that's the 2 to 4 year plan, but dependent on a lot of, figuring out what is the next iPhone or standard way to do it. And then for us to develop the software to integrate that into the process.
That's awesome. That's really exciting. And it's one of the few conversations I've had where people have mentioned AI in a positive way as well. It's because it's quite scary, isn't it, at the minute? But,
it's great. It's like anything. I think too many people think it's going to replace it, just augments and makes things better with it. So we know that the foundation we're building now is needed no matter what. And AI is a tool we use internally, even as designers love AI. It's been a great way to make UX mock-ups of prototypes, generate, even like try all these textures out on here or something with it. So it's something that it makes exceptional designers even faster and better. It doesn't make a bad designer a good designer or a good designer above average. It takes exceptional designers and makes them even more effective with their time with it. Is what we found on our side with it. And it's, if you're scared of it, it probably, to be frank, just means you're not a good designer, right? It's not something that it's never going to replace an exceptional design. Never. It's just doesn't have that creativity and is beyond our computational abilities for now with it. So I think the fear is for people who are in that middle ground where they're like, oh, if my full-time job is just making renders or animations, yes, it's a real possibility that AI could totally replace that in a couple of years with it. And you should be concerned, I guess.
Yeah, got to do something about it now. Yeah. Awesome. Final question. And this is a question that I used to ask at the end of every podcast, and I got told off by Jordan last night for not asking it. But any book recommendations? What are you into at the moment, or podcasts?
Yeah, I don't listen to books or podcasts for the most part with it. I do. For me, again, social media is a great way to connect. And I think just, for better or worse, like brain rotting with TikTok, but it does provide a very quick way to see a large diversity of things. We find new products, new content ideas, new, people reiterating maybe what they read in a book and talking about it there. But that's just a very quick and fast way for me to get content on it that I've never had the attention span to read a book or sit down and listen to a podcast with. I just don't have the attention span to do that with it. So that's more of a personal one with it. But I do quite a bit of like a lot of my days spent reading the news, Wikipedia articles, but it's like, how do I distill information to 2 to 4 minutes? And again, back to AI has been great for distill. We have insights on our own. I'll dump 10,000 customer conversations with ChatGPT and say summarize and spend time reading that with it. Or if I find a good video pod, I'll say summarize the key points for it. And then if there are ones that are interest, I'll listen to that segment with it. So I think that's been a great filter for helping me and, not blindly trust what it's doing, but aggregate information, point out the areas to look at more in and explore those has been great for, whatever, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever you use with it. I've something I've really enjoyed doing of getting more distilled information and having more conversations because you can talk to it too. And you say, hey, what about this? Like, what if all the hypotheticals when you talk about like, World War II battles, like what if this had happened instead? It's like based on this. So I really enjoyed those conversations, but never had the discipline to sit down and read a book outside of high school and college.
No, that's cool.
Yeah.
No, I enjoyed where that went though, in terms of the, you using like AI to basically give you a too long didn't read kind of summary, aren't you?
Yeah, summary and
stuff.
just look at interest area, pull out the interesting insights, and then now they all link them to try to provide more sources, and just go there and you follow the kind of like the same Wikipedia. You click the blue links until you find the rabbit hole of what you're looking for.
Amazing. Well, Christian, it's been fantastic having you on the show. Thank you for making the trip down here and sharing your story with us. If people want to reach out, obviously you're the social media guy, so LinkedIn's probably a good place.
LinkedIn, anywhere you search for Reekon Tools, all roads will lead back to me or someone involved at the company with it. So certainly intimate enough to see that, but anywhere, Google, social media, whatever, search for Reekon Tools and you're bound to find something from us.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Why Design, proudly powered by Kodu. If you got something out of today's conversation, I'd love it if you could leave a quick review or share the episode with someone who will find it useful. It really helps more people discover the show. And if you're working in hardware or physical product development, whether you're a founder, leader, engineer or designer, come and join the Why Design community. We're running events, sharing insights and connecting people who are building great things. You can sign up at teamkodu.com/events or just drop me a note on LinkedIn. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.